Hello, and welcome to River of Ideas, the podcast about greener cities and cleaner water. I'm your host, Nick Busse, the Communications and Operations Manager here at the Mississippi Watershed Management Organization, and I'm here today talking with my boss, our Executive Director, Kevin Reich. Kevin, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Nick. Happy to do this.
And we have kind of a special episode today talking about the redevelopment of Upper Harbor Terminal. It's been in the news quite a bit, but for those who aren't familiar with it, Upper Harbor Terminal is a 53-acre site in North Minneapolis, formerly an industrial site, and it's now being converted into a combination of new housing, commercial space, an entertainment venue, and a new 20-acre riverfront park, which we're very excited about. But let's talk a little bit about what the MWMO is doing at Upper Harbor Terminal. So what's our involvement?
Well, our involvement, Nick, is to ensure that the best management practices could be employed in this once-in-a-generation opportunity. As you mentioned, the scale of this is enormous. 50 acres of urban land is rare to come by. 50 acres of urban land on the riverfront, there's only one of those, and that's the Upper Harbor Terminal. So we took upon us to say, let's see what the best practices that could be employed here. We did have what I'd consider a good trial run at Towerside Innovation District, where we employed multiple properties, multiple projects, and unified them with best management practices vis-a-vis stormwater management. We call it a district system. With those learnings and understandings and sort of proof of concept, we brought those ideas to another level of scale at the Upper Harbor Terminal. And fortunately, we found a home for these grand ideas to unify best management practice, environmental stewardship into one consistent presence at this site.
Right. And so broadly speaking, this is kind of what we do at MWMO. We build green infrastructure. So there's a big redevelopment project, and our role is to make sure that redevelopment is occurring in a way that not only minimizes the environmental impacts, but actually improves the environment. But there's some special stuff happening at Upper Harbor Terminal. And so maybe we can just kind of quickly walk through some of the features that we're building in, because some of them are fairly unique, kind of first time for us and first time for the city as well. So there are kind of three major components. The first one is the shoreline and habitat restoration along the riverfront, which is already taking place. They regraded the shoreline to make it more accessible and also to help establish new native vegetation. Can you talk a little bit about that work?
Yeah, you described it well. Again, as we mentioned, the scale is really unprecedented. This is a mile of riverfront that we're restoring. And of course, as industrial land, much of the industrial land was modified in not very river-friendly ways. And so what we tried to do the best that we can is to regrade it to better emulate the sort of slope that would have been there pre-development, and also support habitat and vegetation in a way that we feel respects the flow of water and also respects the fact that this is a national highway for birds. It is the most significant environmental section of the Minnesota sort of basin that is defined by the Mississippi River. And of course, the urban stretch, which is our responsibility, doesn't always live up to that purpose. Here, we're trying to reclaim that purpose.
Right, and it's actually pretty stark how different it is already. So all of our staff actually took a tour of the site before it was under construction, and it was all, I mean, some of it was vegetated, but it was all invasive weeds. And it was a very kind of rocky, kind of steep shoreline. And so that is completely changed now. And in fact, you can go on our website and see photos of, right now it looks great. There's black-eyed Susans blooming all up and down the shoreline. So that's already better. And then my understanding is that this fall, they're going to be planting new native trees as well. And so as you said, it's a huge piece of shoreline. So that's a big piece of what we're doing there. But that's not the only thing. So we're also doing some pretty interesting stuff with stormwater on the site. So maybe let's talk a little bit about what we call the Southern Regional Treatment System. So first of all, maybe can you talk about the concept of regional stormwater treatment? What does that mean? And then what does that mean in relation to what we're doing at Upper Harbor Terminal?
Certainly. Yeah, one way to think of the Upper Harbor Terminal project is that the main sort of redevelopment site is actually a dozen projects in and of itself. So it's kind of a package deal. But on either side of the main redevelopment, where the buildings will go and the venue will go that you mentioned, are the shoreline that we just discussed, the district system where all the new buildings will be and all the activity. And then there's the regional system, which is to the west. And by a regional system, we say there's an impact area that drains to the river. Some of its surface, much of it is driven by what we call the pipe shed, the infrastructure there to manage stormwater, the traditional infrastructure. The idea was working with Public Works of Minneapolis to say, hey, can we capture some 70 to 80 acres of the nearby watershed, collect it, clean it up, and actually employ that volume of water in the district system. So not only managing the water, mitigating its impact, but actually utilizing it to good effect.
Yeah, and so I believe that drainage acre is 75 acres. And so right now that is draining into the Mississippi River untreated. And so what we're doing is we're not only going to capture that dirty stormwater runoff on site and treat it, but we're actually going to put it to good use. With some pretty interesting features, actually. So that's the third part of the system then is what we're calling the common reuse system. So all of this water is going to drain from this 75-acre part of North Minneapolis. It's going to come into the Upper Harbor site, go into an underground treatment system, and then it is going to be kind of pumped throughout the site. Can you talk about what happens next?
Yeah, so after we capture this incredible volume of almost 80 acres from North Minneapolis, capture it, repurpose it, and then the purpose is actually to contribute to the district system. The district system itself is pretty incredible. It's a series of interconnected collection points and redistribution points and cleaning points throughout the whole system. So if you can think about it, every building there is connected to the one system. And in between the buildings are these incredible amenities. The main park, in addition to the riverfront, there will be this incredible thing where they're repurposing some of the industrial structures to kind of honor that history, and then to create this beautiful amenity. And right in the middle of this beautiful amenity will be what we are calling a living ephemeral stream. It's basically a biomimicry that actually will have life in it. It won't just be something that looks cool with water going through it, like a decorative feature. It actually is intended and designed to be living. And with that, we're bringing people to, a beautiful space, but B, we're actually engaging them in a real way, how we interface with our built environment, with the river, and actually how the river at one time functioned with all these little tributaries, many of which are gone or covered up.
Right. So there's a lot to explore there. But so an ephemeral stream is a stream that typically exists for a few days after a rainfall. It's a thing that exists in nature. You can find a few of them around the metro area here. And so we're recreating that, but we're doing it using reused stormwater runoff from this system. And I think this kind of fits in with something that we've been doing in a lot of our projects, which is, we're not just adding habitat, we're not just treating stormwater runoff. We're also providing all these sort of ancillary benefits. I forget the term for it. Dan Kalman, our planner, who's been involved in this project for the better part of a decade, there's a term he uses, shared stacked benefits. It's this idea that we're not just adding these stormwater best management practices, we're also providing ecological benefits to the broader area, and we're providing public green space as well. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's good you mentioned our planner, Dan Coleman. He was actually the driver of what I call the prototype for Upper Harbor Terminal, the Towerside Innovation District. And all those lessons learned he brings to the table. And of course, there's a kind of an ethos of MWMO, and certainly reflected in how we approach these things. If we have these new opportunities, let's push the envelope. Let's see how far we can go with this, and what can we learn from these experiences. The living stream is an example of that for sure. There's nothing like that actually anywhere that I'm aware of, and it's certainly new for Public Works, Park and Rec, and us to try to do this. And it does have this extra benefit. It actually is an invitation for education to the local youth. It's an amenity for anyone who visits there. They're going to see something that's spectacular and dynamic. And I would also say that it actually has benefits that are actually technical in terms of how water aerated in this manner with engineered vegetation around it is actually a really good way to treat water as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, an interesting aspect of this project is you mentioned there's 12 individual redevelopment projects as part of the larger redevelopment of Upper Harbor Terminal. And there's a lot of interested parties. There's private developers who are involved. There's various public entities. Can you talk about kind of the process and how difficult it was to sort of get everybody on the same page and get some sort of an agreement where we're going to have this shared system that runs through all of these different parcels that are sort of being redeveloped in different phases.
Well, once you have the challenge of the scale that we've mentioned, the complexity of a multi-phased redevelopment site, let's just throw in a few more challenges. Let's try something new. That always kind of puts a sort of pause to the gears of the machinery of how projects get done, be it the infrastructure or the built environment with the redevelopment. So there's going to be some challenges when you're doing something new of this scale. And we had to work through that. There was a lot of conversations, a lot of legal work. We're talking about property rights. We're talking about public policy. We're talking about budgets and the commitments that go with what you put in and who's going to manage that. Those are a lot of questions, and a lot of different interested parties, through their own purpose, had to kind of debate that, discuss that, and come to a conclusion and a consensus. Quite a process, but I think the results will be worth it.
There's another part of this project that we haven't mentioned yet. It's mentioned on our website, but it's something a little bit unusual for MWMO, which is we're building a pedestrian overlook. Can you talk about what we're doing there?
Oh, yeah. It's one of these what I consider a really cool feature. So part of the challenges of any site, there's going to be sort of constraints, local geotechnical constraints. But what if you take some of the constraints, like a weird dent in the riverfront, pipes that may not be in the right place for the developer? What if we said those are actually opportunities? And so with that, we are realigning the system, the drainage system, so it actually will accommodate the development, but also becomes a new amenity in and of itself. To think through how a pinch point for the beautiful parkway that Park and Rec's putting in along the shoreline, all of a sudden we turned it into an amenity. And so the overlook is this beautiful sort of bridge structure, and it becomes a stage to really see some of the visual power of this site. You look to the left, and you see the beautiful river and the bird rookery, which is this unbelievable natural phenomena in our city. I mean, you can't even believe that it isn't a city. It's almost like a jungle with those birds, the variety of them, the noise that picks up at the evening. It's pretty spectacular. And then you just look to the right, and then you see this fantastic city in all its, spectacular glory of the downtown buildings. And so you really get this dichotomy of a deep presence of nature and an urban environment that are right next to each other, and this is the stage for it. And underneath, there's this, again, more biomimicry. Water overflow falls were scattered throughout the river pre-development. Most of them are gone. This is sort of a interpretation of that, but not a mimicry that's trying to pretend it's natural. It takes natural rock and actually metal sheets and captures the water when there's overflow moments, just like it would have been pre-development, and has the cascading effect, but it also preserves the riverfront at that kind of interesting indent. So you get nature, kind of man working together in a very visible and functional way, and above it, this stage, which is so dynamic. I think anyone who comes to the site has to have a moment at that overlook and contemplate nature and where we live in a city.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was just sort of good luck that the place where the overlook was needed so that we could route the bike and pedestrian trail in the right place, and so that we could have the stormwater infrastructure the way we needed it, just happened to be right across from the Huron Rookery, which if people haven't been to the Huron Rookery, you can see it from Marshall Terrace Park right now. This will be, I think, a much more spectacular way to see it. Something definitely worth seeing. And as you point out, you look one way and you see nature, this beautiful place where all these birds have this colony, and then you turn to your right and you've got this beautiful view of downtown and the Lowry Avenue Bridge, and it really is what is so cool about the urban riverfront to me. And that actually makes me think of kind of the broader context in which this is happening, which is all of these industrial riverfront areas north of St. Anthony Falls. There's many pieces of that are being kind of reclaimed now for the public and for nature. We've got Halls Island was restored a few years ago. We were, of course, involved in that project. Graco Park, formerly known as the Shearer site, another formerly kind of industrial area that is being reconstructed right now, turned into a new city park along the riverfront. MWMO is funding some habitat restoration there and some stormwater infrastructure. And then also Ole Olson Park, right across the river from that. Similar thing, they're building actually a new trail connection that I'm personally really looking forward to using. And we're also involved in some habitat restoration there. So I think it's great to see the park board sort of reclaiming all of these pieces of riverfront for the public. And I think it's great that we're involved making them, again, like a better place environmentally, not just, reducing the environmental impact of redevelopment, but really making them an ecologically beneficial place.
Yeah, Park and Rec, I mean, our three partners on the site, the City of Minneapolis, both their community planning and economic development, CPED, and Public Works, of course, the infrastructure people. Being creative and thinking big has really driven the Upper Harbor Terminal project, the creativity and opportunistic elements that we've talked about. The commitment to do something special and unique, to respect the river, is absolutely something that's really true of Upper Terminal. But as you mentioned, this is part of a long vision. The northern stretch, the upper above the falls stretch of the river, is the most industrial. It's intensely industrial. And so when we piece by piece by piece, you can't really commit unless you have a long vision. The above the falls plan, which has been refreshed with some of the many of the insights of what was called the River First plan, really says it all. Obviously, with an organization like MWMO, Mississippi's in our name, river is our first objective. But to have partners like Park and Rec to say that that's their main objective in this stretch of their vast system is really to have a strong partnership. And with that kind of partnership, that kind of focus, and that kind of long vision and the commitment to actually deliver on it is really what's making this tick. And it's great to see these pieces happen step by step by step. And it gives you kind of courage because the steps that need to follow in the next, say, 20, 30 years are going to be challenging. But success gives you a boldness to keep going.
How does the MWMO typically get involved in a project like this? And how did we get involved in Upper Harbor Terminal specifically? I think it would probably be an interesting story. But then how do we get involved in projects generally? Do people come to us? Do we go to them? Mm-hmm. How does that process get initiated?
It can actually work either way, Nick. We have objectives based on our analysis of where opportunities might be within the watershed. And we might go to them and say, hey, is there any projects here? We think there's an opportunity. Or we actually will get a call from them or a list of projects that might be imminent, and there'll be a conversation, is there an overlap from their perspective? So it can go either way. And I think that's really the heart of partnership, to have a two-way street, looking for opportunities, knowing what each other does is really great, and it's true of our relationship with the City of Minneapolis and our relationship with Park and Rec. All of that really on display in a grand manner and with great sort of common spirit on the Riverfront projects that we've talked about.
Mm-hmm. And how did we arrive at this particular design or this sort of combination of features? So we've got the shoreline restoration, we've got the regional stormwater treatment system, and then we've got what we're calling the common reuse system. And so those things together form this sort of district system. And we should maybe talk a little bit about that term and what that means. But how did we arrive at this particular design? And I would encourage people to go to our website and check out, we have a map of all of the MWMO's sort of contributions to the site. And it does occur throughout the entire breadth of this 53-acre site. It's a huge project, but I'm curious what the process was where we decided, we're going to do an ephemeral stream and we're going to do an underground treatment system at this location, and it's going to capture from this watershed. And
yeah, well, it's a very iterative process. And so the City of Minneapolis, obviously, they have a lot of purposes: affordable housing, job opportunities, just developing the tax base is front of mind for them. Park and Rec, obviously it's on the river. They have the River First plan, which we, of course, worked with them to kind of create the 50-year priorities there. And then, of course, we, knowing that we've had some successes with new sort of more regional treatment and district systems, which is essentially taking redevelopment sites and having buildings connected into one very efficient and shared system for their what would be singular water management objectives that they would have to do. So you get the efficiency, and then you get these opportunities. We don't necessarily always know which opportunities will present themselves, but we have a long list of things that have been tried in other places, things that we've studied with other partners, and say, hey, these are some treatments that have worked in other places. They have these benefits, not just with water quality, as you mentioned, but they can have other benefits, educational, sort of just even enjoyment and health, in addition to managing water. And so you test them out. And because we have partnerships that are strong and long-lasting and have been tested over time, we can be iterative. And sometimes you just don't know where these different ideas can come together. You talk, you share ideas, you plan, and then all of a sudden, oh, wait, here's an opportunity, this ephemeral stream idea that we've been always eager to try something like that. Could it work here? And as it's housed within a park system that's connected to the riverfront, it really made sense. Again, it's an iterative process with strong partnerships.
You had mentioned Towerside earlier in the podcast, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that project and how it is similar and maybe different too from Upper Harbor, and maybe does it represent sort of an evolution in some way?
It certainly does. I mean, the scale of the two redevelopment sites, obviously the Upper Harbor Terminal is significantly larger, but it has a similarity in the sense that you have different buildings. In the case of Towerside, I believe they're almost all residential with maybe some components that are commercial, but pretty much residential, large residential buildings that are connected up. And then there is an additional amenity in a little pocket park that was created that the community really valued and never really had at the time. Also an industrial area that was redeveloped. In addition to the scale of Upper Harbor Terminal, which is larger, you have the adjacency of the Riverfront's a big deal. And so it's going to really drive a lot of the ideas and objectives that you might want to have. And then additionally, Upper Harbor Terminal has job creation as an objective, health hub for the community, interfacing with the youth and trying to create opportunities that attract that kind of activation are embedded in the Upper Harbor Terminal, which is different than Towerside, which again is mostly residential. Also, right in the middle of Upper Harbor Terminal is an event space. First Avenue's outdoor amphitheater concept, really great concept. And there, they have made it very clear that they were very enticed by the adjacency of the river. Places like Red Rocks, you've got this beautiful rock formations and you're surrounded by nature, and then you have this music experience. Well, we think the river here, the Mississippi River, the great river of North America, is also that kind of attraction and amenity. So to bring people to the river, to enjoy music, to enjoy where they live, to have a park experience, and to know that the big show, what really makes the there is the Mississippi River. And of course, that's very enticing to us because we want people to think that way as well.
When you think about Upper Harbor Terminal and the work that we're doing there, what do you think about that work speaks to the kind of evolution of this organization? Because we started out very small. We didn't have a full staff. We didn't have a building. It was literally just, I think, Dan, our planner, Doug, our former executive director, and I think maybe one or two other people. And now, we have a seat at the table at all these projects, and we have a full staff, and we're doing monitoring and planning and all this stuff. Do you think Upper Harbor Terminal speaks to kind of a kind of success story in the sense of like now we do have a seat at the table and we have some credibility with our partners and we can do great things like this?
Absolutely. I mean, as you mentioned in the early days, when you start from scratch with an organization, you have to, develop that, nurture that, create the partnerships, build the sort of capacity internally. But like you say, a seat at the table, so we're a government partner in a project site like Upper Harbor Terminal, and those things don't happen just overnight. So there was that evolution of developing the organization in that manner, and of course, my predecessor it's a remarkable achievement that we evolved to that level. And then once you have the mechanics to do things as a government agency, and we are a government agency, sometimes thought of as a nonprofit or some kind of advocacy group, but in fact, we are a unit of government that spends public money to do a certain purpose that the state enables us to do. So we had to get things done. We have the capacity, we're an organization, we're doing projects, and great projects. We're trying new things, we're pushing the envelope, as some would like to say. What we have with Upper Harbor Terminal is the culmination of developing the organization, getting some learning and capacity to do projects, and then to work with our partners in a very coordinated, collaborative way to bring all of that capacity and all that project knowledge together in a collective way for an aggregate impact that would not have happened otherwise. And we think that as an MWMO, Mississippi Watershed Management Organization, that's who we are. We bring together the partners, the resources, the project that can be river-centric, environmentally astute, and get it done.
Well, and I think one of the reasons people sometimes get confused about the fact that we're a government organization is that we don't have any regulatory authority. So everything that we do has to be done in a spirit of collaboration, in partnerships. Mm-hmm. And so to me, the fact that we can do great things like Upper Harbor Terminal and Towerside and Graco Park, all of the projects that we're doing, I think it really speaks to the fact that our staff has spent invested a lot of time in trying to be a good partner to our city governments, the park board, all of our local partners.
Absolutely. In my role on City Council, I chair the Public Works and Transportation Committee, which of course has surface water and sewer, the infrastructure people that we interface with. And of course, they have a lot of responsibilities. They have an old aging system to maintain. They have to coordinate with road projects, redevelopment projects. And the scale of their responsibilities is quite enormous. And so for a group that wants to try new interventions, push the envelope in certain ways, we have to be respectful of that sort of standing obligations that they have and the enormity of their responsibilities, and really come with that understanding to say, hey, we can be a partner all the way through a new sort of way of doing something as either a pilot project or a massive redevelopment site like Upper Harbor Terminal. So it's kind of the spirit of partnership, the spirit of understanding how other governments work and what their responsibilities are, and seeing how we can supplement what they're trying to do and push our mission as well.
So North Minneapolis has been disconnected historically from the Mississippi River. Part of the intention with the redevelopment of Upper Harbor Terminal is to help them reconnect. Can you talk a little bit about some of the hope around the future community connections between the community that exists in North Minneapolis and the riverfront?
Yeah, you make a really strong point. Those elements that actually created that disconnect are very real. To have an intensely industrial area, not very inviting. 94 going through was a very strong physical and I would say sort of social communitarian divide between the river and that community. These are physical things. These are historical things. These are psychological disconnections. And so you have to be able to create the connections that bring you there physically. Right now, we presently have Dowling Avenue as the one connection to the northern stretch. There's talk about part of a 94 and 252 upgrade that could have a 34th Avenue pedestrian bridge. Not approved yet, but it's in the conversation and the design planning discussion. That could create a great connection to the southern end. Those are physical connections. That's not the only challenge. When you have that kind of separation for so many decades, you really have to make an invitation that's compelling, known, and real to that community. And that's where, again, as I mentioned, the outreach component, the educational component that we do and our partners do will be very important to make that reconnection real, beyond just the physical.
I want to circle back to the ephemeral stream for a minute. What is the purpose of building an ephemeral stream at the site? What sorts of life forms does that serve?
Well, if it's going to be a living ephemeral stream, it needs to support life. And life can be anything from insects, bioinvertebrates. The more scientifically oriented people have very fancy terms, but at the end of the day, it's the things that live in the mud, the things that fly around the plants that actually other animals want to eat. We mentioned the birds. They will very much welcome the bird buffet that an ephemeral stream should support. And that's one of the things that we'll be monitoring. It won't just be the rate or how many solids we're extracting from the river, from the water before it goes to the river, but is there actually life there? Is the water temperature appropriate to support that life? These are new things that we will have to engage in from a monitoring and research standpoint, in addition to actually putting it in the ground. We believe that sort of natural environment can be a great platform for not just enjoyment, but actual education. Hands-on learning is something that our school systems talk about. The opportunities within a building for youth are limited. You can only get so much from a book, in my opinion, when you're talking about nature. But going to a place that is actually designed to engage and learn and be hands-on for youth, I think that's a powerful way to really move our mission for the long term. That's the long game investment. People will support and will behave in a supportive way to a river or a forest if they know about it, are connected to it, and love it. This is a way to get that level of connection.
Right, and so we and our outreach staff does a lot of education for youth around macroinvertebrates, and macroinvertebrates are the type of life form that is supported by these ephemeral streams. And so, in order to support those life forms like dragonflies, you need to have clean water. Hence the need to treat the polluted stormwater runoff that's coming into the site. And so that seems like you said, a great opportunity for doing future outreach on that site someday.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, it's a really good point. It's one thing to have the traditional system that moves water. Great. Keeps it off the roads. Your foundation won't collapse. It does its job. But to have these, old 100-year-old tubes just shooting whatever we bring to the sewer system, it's almost like a pollution cannon. So obviously a lot of the investments we've had have to intervene, knock out the sludge, knock out the contaminants, the things that really pollute and in many ways could actually kill the river. But once the water is not just something to manage and it's something to use, that's when you've done the 180. And I don't think of any stronger, more eloquent example than the Living Ephemeral seem to say, we are now going from managing water to mitigating the impacts of that management to really bringing it alive. And water is life. And this is actually a real park. It's a real part of the system, the traditional system, but it's now completely playing a different role. And it's a healthy, inviting role.
Yeah. It's interesting. When I talk to people about what the MWMO is and what we do, and the fact that we build green infrastructure, I think a lot of people are sort of surprised that this is a relatively new concept in urban planning. Mm-hmm. Things used to be very different. You just designed a redevelopment for whatever it was going to be used for. And like you said, you just found the quickest way to get the stormwater off the site to the nearest body of water, and then it was somebody else's problem. Can you maybe just reflect on that a little bit about sort of the evolution of urban planning and why it is that it kind of took us so long to figure out, when we redevelop something in an urban area, we should consider the environmental impacts of that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of discussion about global warming, local pollution, and the health impacts that it has on communities, particularly where communities have a concentration of those negative impacts. And to work against those impacts, there's kind of two main strategies. One, to mitigate. To say, all right, what are the ways we can sort of mitigate this situation? How can we reduce the impacts? The other is, and this is kind of reflected in Upper Terminal and certainly reflected in our quest for the living ephemeral stream, is how can we completely reverse that? What was once a challenge and it had to be managed is now an amenity that can be enjoyed. And I think that's a way where we can really get a lot of livability impacts when we start with the environment itself. I think a lot of the things that make a place not that livable or not that habitable or not a very enjoyable place to be, live, work, or learn is that it was a way, things were just built to get something done. And now we have a thing where, wait a minute, how can we comport and engage with the environment that's healthy and supports community?
So we've talked a little bit about what we're doing at Upper Harbor Terminal. We haven't mentioned the size of the investment yet, which is currently slated to be around $10 million. What's the total timeline on this project? Like, when is this all going to be done? When can somebody go to Upper Harbor Terminal or whatever it's called in the future and go enjoy looking at the ephemeral stream and all of the feature and the overlook and all the features we're building there?
Yeah, some of the elements can be enjoyed in what I consider more of the near term. As you mentioned, the riverfront is already pretty cool looking, and it's only going to get better with the trees, etc. But the other day, what it caught my eye. I was looking over, was the still water reflecting this band of gold all along the riverfront with the flowering that happened. Was pretty spectacular in and of itself. The parkway's in, so you can kind of walk around, though it's a redevelopment site at the moment. Certain elements might straggle on for some time. The different development sites. Housing project might take some longer time. The commercial components might take a longer time. But from our perspective, we're in this in a very real way with our partners all the way to 2030. Part of that will be the gradual implementation of some of the features that are connected to the system that we're investing in. And some of it will just be the fact that we are a partner in how this will get managed moving forward. And because of its complexity, because of its scale, we will be working as sort of a district administrator up until that time. And at that time, we'll hand it off to the owner. It should be noted that the property, the 50 acres, will always be owned by the city of Minneapolis, with the exception of the park and rec piece, which will be theirs as a public entity. The rest will all be leaseholders. All the other land users will be leaseholders. So it will be the city of Minneapolis's after that, including the system. And so that'll be a long ramp up of learning, working together. But from MW's perspective, this is at least till 2030. But I think along the way, there will be places to enjoy that will be more immediate.
Great.
Also, I'll note that this is a real budgetary commitment on our end. This is the largest single investment in our history, but again, it's our largest opportunity. And so it's commensurate in that sense. And I recall the discussions that we had at the board level with the executive leadership at the time that, no, this is an opportunity that's big. Let's come to the table big.
Great. Any closing thoughts?
The upper terminal is one of those things where it's hard. Any element of it could be its own dissertation or its own discussion. There's just components within components. But at the end of the day, we're bringing three strong, big-scale objectives together, reclaiming a mile of the riverfront and making it spectacular and very inviting for people and the environment. Again, an industrial stretch of this beautiful national park, international bird flyway, and saying it's going to play its part. It's going to be probably one of the healthiest stretches versus one of the most neglected stretches. Then we'll have what we're calling a district system, where multiple redevelopment sites will be connected with the environment and the river as a central defining feature. That's incredible. And then that is connected to the city of Minneapolis' first regional system. It's not only its first regional system, it will take 70 plus acres of North Minneapolis water and treat it. It will actually connect it to the other systems, the district and the riverfront, and it'll be employed. So you have this sort of symphony of riverfront, nature, district systems, redevelopment, infrastructure at a scale not just managing water, not just mitigating impacts, but actually contributing this great asset, water, before it gets to this greater asset, the river.
Great. Well, Kevin, this has been really informative. Thank you for being on the podcast and talking about this huge project. And I would encourage people to go to our website, MWMO.org. We've got a webpage about the project. You can see photos of the progress. You can see a map of all of the sort of enhancements that MWMO has planned for the site. Check that out at MWMO.org, and thanks for watching and listening.